So, you want to write a novel series? Well, you've come to the right place. This YouTube channel is going to be dedicated to talking about writing novel series. The way I figure it, there's tons of channels of people just sitting on the floor in front of bookshelves or maybe in front of green screens. Figured I'd do something a little different. I don't know about you, but my mind can't wander if my eyes can't wander. I'm locked up in some room just staring at the walls. It's like it just pours water on my creative flame. I got to get out. I got to look at stuff. If I can't see new things, how can I expect to imagine new things? Now, I'm not here to talk down to you like I'm some, highly successful writer or like I've read every book under the sun. I'm not some, university educated person in regards to literature or whatever. Nor have I been employed by some publishing house as an editor or like a, literary agent or anything like that. I'm literally just some hillbilly walking around in the woods having a conversation with you all. Anyway, let's get on with what this video is about. You see, I've been writing a novel series for like 5 years, 6 years, something like that. And along the way, I have learned quite a few things that I never even considered when I was first getting started. And so I decided to make this channel to raise awareness about all the things that I think people should consider before writing a novel series. Every video will be a new thing to consider, and this will be consideration number one. Well, consideration number one is technically 2 parts. Part one, should you write a novel series? And part two, can you write a novel series? I get that they're pretty similar, but they are different. So let's get into it. Part one, should you write a novel series? If you want to tell a story, that's great. But is your story big enough, dynamic enough to justify spreading it out over 3 books, 5 books, 10 books? If you have a story where you have a hero trying to, beat a villain, can you just sum that all up in one book? I think it's important for you to figure out what your story is, what your story requires. You shouldn't have to stretch out your story, and you shouldn't have to condense your story. Your story simply is what it is, and you need to figure out what that proper length is. If you can fit it all in one book, don't stretch it out to be 3 books. If your story requires 3 books, don't shrink it down to just 1 book. If you're going to write a series, it's going to take a lot of work. It's going to take a lot of physical work, but it's also going to take a lot of mental work. Writing a series is a commitment. It's a commitment between you and yourself, but it's also a commitment between you and your readers. From the time that you finish your first book to the time you finish your last book, I mean, it might be only 5 years. It might be 15 years, who knows? And that means you have to commit that kind of time in your personal life. Writing a series isn't as simple as, like a hobby, like a little fun thing to do over winter break. You don't look outside and think, gee, it sure is snowing hard out there. I wish I could go outside and do something. I guess I'll just start writing a novel series. Yeah, that's not how that works. That's not how any of that works. Writing a novel series is going to take up a chapter of your life, a chapter of your story in this world. And that means you personally are going to do a lot of growing and maturing along the way. You might start a novel series believing one thing in your personal life, and then by the time you finish writing the novel series, you don't believe that thing anymore. It could be a political belief, ideology thing. It could be a religious thing. You might be a non-theist person when you start the book, and then because you delve into something, you end up becoming a believer in some faith by the time you've published the last book in the series. Imagine if you started a book where the main character, let's just say, hates dogs for some reason, and it's a very passionate belief of yours. You just personally really hate dogs, and so that's what your story is about. But then by the time you get to the last book of the series, or maybe somewhere in the middle, your opinions totally change, and you think dogs are kind of cool now. You don't think that hating on dogs is such a good thing. So if you like dogs now, are you going to want to write a story that's, hateful towards dogs and says bad things about people who like dogs? Now, you might be saying, you know, asking yourself, what the hell is this guy talking about? I want to write a story about dragons, man. I want to write stories about vampires and werewolves and stuff. Okay, yeah, that's really cool. That is really, really cool window dressing. Because realistically, when you're writing a story, any story, could be a flash fiction, it could be a 20 book series, novel series, whatever you're writing, there's underlining themes. There's messages in there um, that you're conscious of, and I believe there's also some that you are unconscious of. Things that you put in your book that you don't even realize you actually put in there. Things that you will write a book, and then you will learn from your own book. You will unconsciously teach yourself things that you didn't know. And so if you start writing a story that's talking about one thing, and then you stop believing in that thing, it's going to be really hard to find the motivation to finish that series. If you're not happy doing it, why would you do it? If it's not bringing you some type of peace, some type of closure, why waste all that time, that money, that energy into doing it? Maybe the reason is because of fans. Unfortunately, you'll have an obligation to your readers. If you cultivate a fan base that is, let's say, vegan, and then by the end of the series, you're not vegan anymore, it's going to create some problems when you're talking positively about, you know, how great a cheeseburger is or a steak. And all your fans are like, what? I thought this author was a vegan. They betrayed me. Obviously, I'm using a kind of a silly example, but it gets the point across. It's not just about committing, like mentally, though. Like I said, there's a lot of physical work as well. You've got to learn a lot about different things of the world. You've got to do some research here and there. Even if it's like a fantasy thing, you know, you have to figure out, you have to brainstorm. You have to take time to imagine and think up these magical systems, these creatures. You have to invent kingdoms. You have to invent, whole other worlds. Maybe you're writing science fiction, and you're going to have to come up with a story that's dynamic enough that it talks about, this planet and the history of that planet. And then you got to come up with this other planet and how they fought each other or whatever. You got to come up with the history of kingdoms and how they fought each other. What was their rivals? What was the rivals between different clans or villages? Now, I'm not saying that it's impossible to write a novel series about something as boring and mundane as like a love triangle. But you're going to have to put some stuff in there to spice it up, something like werewolves or vampires or whatever. Whatever you're going to put in that story, it's got to spice it up enough to justify that series length. If you're writing one book, it's okay to just kind of freeball it, figure it out as you write. That works for you, cool. But if you're going to write a series, you have to actually write out some type of plot. Maybe not the whole thing. You don't have to figure out what each book is, about beat for beat, but you've got to at least figure out what the overall story, the whole thing's about, and then start breaking down, generally speaking, like, all right, book one, there's a building that burns down and everyone's confused. Book two, it's revealed that this guy did it, and now we have to go and find where they're located. His group is hiding out. Book three, there's a big clash, and some bombs go off, and then the city gets put in lockdown, or whatever your book is about. You've got to kind of figure out what's going on. Something that a lot of writers run into as a problem is the middle of their book gets kind of boring. So they have an idea of how they want to start the book. They have an idea of how they want to finish the book. And then they think, well, I'll just fill it out and the middle will just kind of fill in itself. And then what happens is readers get bored with the middle of the book and you run into issues with people quitting your book before the end of the book. This problem can become even worse when we're talking about a novel series. So maybe you've got a 5-book series and you've got book one really, you really understand what's going on there. And then book two, you're just kind of like, meh, I think I know what's going on. I'll figure it out. And then you definitely know how book 5 is going to be. You're like, dude, the end of this series is going to be great, man. There's going to be dragons fighting each other and aliens coming down. They're going to have super laser guns that shoot magical, beams of cheese or whatever your story's about. But then when it comes to thinking about what book 3 and book 4 are going to be about, you're like, yeah, I don't know, man. It'll just come to me. It'll fill in itself. And so what happens is readers like book 1, people think book 2 is pretty cool, and then you get a lot of bad reviews on book 3 and book 4, and people think, yeah, this author lost the plot, and then no one really wants to get to book 5, which you said was going to be so great because of the dragons and the cheese guns. The other part of this consideration, can you write a novel series? Now, I'm not telling you what you can and can't do, but I am strongly advising you. Um, it is not wise to make the first thing you ever write. Don't make that be the first book of a series. The truth is, the first thing you ever write is going to suck. No one starts something with, perfection. It's going to take a long time to get there. And writing is definitely something that you've got to learn. Now, to be specific, I'm not saying that the first thing you like publicly publish can't be the first book of a novel series. I'm not saying that, though. If you want to do like a traditional publishing, I just don't see that happening unless you're famous. Because who are you? If you actually want to do a traditional publishing, the big publishers, they're gonna wonder, is this person gonna make us money? Because if they don't know for sure that you're gonna make them money, they're not gonna publish you. But generally speaking, the first thing you publish can be the start of a series, but just make sure that you've actually written something. It's about you increasing your skills as a writer. If the first thing you've ever written is the first book of your novel series as a whole is going to be a failure. I mean, I guess I can't say that for certain, you know, but it's highly likely that it's going to be really bad. The first book will be a disaster. You'll be a train wreck. And then when it fails, you're going to have two options. You're going to have to either you're going to, tone out all the critics. Y'all don't know what you're talking about. My book is great. You people, you're just uncultured. You're unread. Y'all don't know what you're talking about. My book is the greatest book ever self-published on Amazon. And then you're going to not take their advice. You're going to just repeat the same mistakes, and you're going to release the second book and the third book, and they're going to be just as bad as the first. And because people read the first one and it was so bad, no one's going to come back for the second one. They're going to be like, yo, we know that this writer is not good. Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. I'm not coming back. So what will happen is you'll buckle down. You'll say no to the critics, and you'll keep publishing and keep writing, and you'll put out the second book and the third book and the fourth and the fifth and whatever. And your views or read page, whatever, your purchases, your sales, all of that's going to nosedive. And as it nosedives, it's going to weigh on your morale. You're going to really start doubting yourself, hating your writing, and you're going to start really thinking of yourself as a failure. And it could cause you to just, one, you might leave it incomplete and never finish it. But you also may never write again. It could, demoralize you so bad that you just think, I'm a terrible writer. I shouldn't be writing. I give up. And so you got to just do it the right way. Get some training in your personal time. Write some stuff. Find something that is cool enough in your mind to commit some time to writing it. And then expect it to not be good. Expect it to be a failure. And that's okay. Write like a one-off book and move on. If you have an actual novel series idea, hold on to it and set it aside. Put it on the back burner. Wait until you have the skills to really commit to it. The other option you have, if you make your first book, the first book of your novel series, and it crashes and burns, instead of ignoring the critics, you listen to them. And what do you do when you listen to them? You take your book off the internet. You delist it. And you say, don't worry, everybody. Don't worry, all the people who already bought the first book. I'm going to take this book down. I'm going to go back to the drawing board. We're going to re-edit this thing. We're going to re-polish it up. I'm going to make it better than ever. Like, okay, I'm glad that you're listening to us, but we shouldn't have to do this. Because now we're going backwards. Now, I, as the consumer, I'm going to have to wait and repurchase this thing. And what am I purchasing? Because you came to me and you said, I have this great book, you should buy it. And I believed you. But I now see that you were lying. Even if you weren't maliciously lying, you were at least speaking falsely. The book wasn't great. And you expect me to come back and not only one day buy book 2 of the series, but you want me to buy the same book again? I bought his book and it was bad. And now I'm going to buy that book again, said nobody. You know, we all say, don't judge a book by its cover. And the reason we say it is because um, we like to be ironic because, everybody judges books by their cover. Okay, well, there's another thing that is important to consider, which is you only have one opportunity to make a good first impression. And if your first book in your series is a nightmare, no one's coming back for book 2. Unfortunately, that's just the way it works. Let's look at me, for example. So, I'm writing this novel series, okay? And the first book of this novel series will be the first fictional book that I've ever published under my name. So, I've written and published a book before. It was nonfiction. That experience allowed me to learn the process of simply committing to a work, to a piece of literature, writing it, self-editing it, and then going into the Amazon KDP formatting process and learning about that. I had to contact, a book cover person, deal with that stuff, learn about the ISBN and all of that stuff. If you don't know what that is, look into it. It's important. And eventually I published that small non-fiction book, and I breathed a sigh of relief. I've done it. All right, now I have some idea of what it's like to publish a book. So then I took the next step and I decided to write a little bit of fiction, just a short story. So I went on to the famous Wattpad website, wrote out a little piece of short fiction under a pen name, and there it is. It's just out there on the internet somewhere. Maybe someone read it. I don't even know. It was an interesting little story. I liked it. It was kind of cool, kind of creative. And with its completion, I had a second step of experience under my belt. I had published a book before, so I understood that. And then I had begun to write some type of fiction. So I understood creating characters, creating a new world, a little bit of plot in there. Okay. Like I said, it was short. I think it was only like 5 chapters long or something, maybe 6 chapters. So then I took it to the next step. I used that same pen name, and I wrote a full-on fictional novel, a whole story. It was like 600 pages. I don't remember what the word count was, but it was pretty long, and I published it. So I was taking all of that to the next level. I was publishing, but I was publishing a much bigger work that I had to do a lot more edits to. And it was a more in-depth fictional story. Had to do a lot more planning out, figuring out character arcs, story arcs, all that stuff. There's a lot more to it. Of course, it was a self-insert thing. It was like a fantastical biography, basically. But hey, it is what it is. I don't care. I'm not promoting it to anybody, that's for sure. I haven't went back and read it, so I don't know. But anyway, it's out there. I'll probably have to take that down at some point, even though it's under a pen name. It still bothers me that it's out there. But hey, like I said, your first book's gonna suck, and yeah. But I went out of my way to do these things, to publish a book, to write a fictional short story, to write in a fictional full book. I knew that these were steps that I needed to take. It's like, you know, uh, getting your license or something. It's like it's like taking a training course or going to fucking boot camp for the military. It's like, yeah, it's going to suck, but you've got to do it. And so, in summary, if you're going to write a novel series, the first thing, the number one thing you need to consider is A, should you write a novel series? And B, can you write a novel series? Figure out if your story warrants multiple books and do some self-reflecting and be honest with yourself and realize whether or not you have the skills to commit to this for years. It's a lot. Anyway, I hope I see you in the second video.